Don't you hate it when things are unfair? For example, maybe when you studied for hours for that history test that you barely passed, only to find out that your friend got a B who you know got the answers from a friend right before he took it. Unfair. Or when your sister, who never cleans her room, never does her chores, and always messes things up, seems to always get what she wants. While maybe you feel like you hardly ever get what you want. And it's frustrating because you're the one that actually is the one that keeps things in order around the house. Yet you never seem to get any recognition from your parents. It's unfair. Or maybe it happens whenever you're scrolling through Instagram. Maybe you're scrolling, totally happy with your life, watching friends' stories, until all of a sudden you see something that kind of deflates you. Maybe she went on your favorite vacation spot for the weekend and it made you jealous. Or maybe he got to go to that concert that you really wanted to go to and it's all over his story. Or maybe his family is still together, which means he doesn't have to change houses every weekend like you do. Or he got the newest this. Her life is so much better because she has that. You know what I'm talking about. It's just not fair. You see, we assume that other people have the perfect life. We look at what maybe they post online and compare it to what we have. And when we do that, their life looks better. They look better. And maybe you think their life is greater than my life. We feel less than, and it's typically when we respond in one of the following ways. We overachieve. Maybe seeing everyone else's perfect life lights a fire under you, and you start working really hard to keep up with what other people are doing in hopes of getting the same things. Or maybe the second thing is we do nothing. Maybe watching others makes you feel like there's no way you could ever do what they do or be who they are, so why even try? And the last thing we do is we play it over and over in our minds, whether it's anxiety, sadness, jealousy, or motivation, to go out there and make your post look better. You find yourself unable to think about maybe anything else. See, we've all perfected the art of projecting the life we want others to think we have, even if it doesn't match up to the life we actually have. Here's what's crazy. We forget that everybody else is doing the same thing. They're posting their best life, not their real life. See, comparison has become such a norm in our culture that most of us honestly don't even realize that we're doing it. The good news is that what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes today will not only help us recognize when we're doing it, but I think it's also going to help us understand what to do about it. In a world full of social media that may seem impossible and totally unrealistic, all right? But hang out with me for a minute. See, one of the greatest teachers and followers of Jesus that ever lived was a man named Paul. He made it his mission to make sure that everyone he met knew how their lives could benefit from following Jesus. Paul was known for being a pretty direct person. He was passionate about following Jesus and leading others to do the same. While everything Paul did was out of love, sometimes people felt like maybe Paul was being a little more calling people out in their areas. Maybe they weren't measuring up. In response, they did what a lot of us do, as they lashed out. Have you ever done that? I know I've lashed out at people. But they began to tear Paul down. But listen to how Paul responds to these criticisms as he's being torn down. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 12 says, "Oh, don't worry. We wouldn't dare say that we are as wonderful as the other men who tell you how important they are. But they are only comparing themselves with each other, using themselves as the standard of measurement. How ignorant." Now, maybe I'm wrong, but this kind of sounds like some sarcasm happening here. See, Paul clapped back at his critics. He wasn't messing around. And in this passage, he's addressing the comparing that is going on among the people and the struggle that it's created. See, Paul is saying in no uncertain terms, it's absolutely ridiculous to let your behavior and your life be based on a comparison to someone else's behavior or life. So there's a principle found in the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament of the Bible that Paul would have known by heart. And in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23, it says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." See, Solomon, the man who wrote this principle in this proverb, was passionate about how important it is to guard our hearts. Why? Because what we do almost always comes from what we believe in our hearts. Our hearts matter because they control everything else. So we should guard our hearts. The opposite, one of the quickest ways to destroy our hearts, is comparison. If we see a post about how great someone else's life is and we allow it to get to our hearts to maybe mess with what we believe about ourselves, then we kind of endanger ourselves a little bit. Don't compare your worth with their post. Don't look at someone else's life and assume that their life is perfect and believe that your life is no good because in that moment it doesn't look like theirs. Now, don't make decisions about your worth based on what you see or perceive in other people. Which sounds great, but how do we actually fight this temptation to allow comparison to rule our lives? How do we guard our hearts like Solomon is suggesting? Now, it may not be easy, but it starts the very word that Solomon used, guard. Maybe set some boundaries, right? You guard your heart whenever you guard your Instagram. Pay attention to how it affects you. Or guard your Snapchat, guard your TikTok, guard your scrolling, guard your thoughts when you are watching the likes roll in, or maybe not roll in fast enough. Guard your comments, guard who you follow, guard yourself whenever you interact with others who maybe make you feel like less than yourself. Guard. In other words, when you find yourself in a situation, whether it's on social media or in this real life world, where you are more likely to compare yourself to others, be on guard. Pay attention. Something is trying to get to your heart and you need to set a boundary so that it doesn't get there. We guard our hearts by paying attention to what we feel when we're tempted to play this whole comparison game. Look, you aren't the only one who struggles to compare your life with someone else's, but living a life where you feel less than doesn't have to define how you feel, and it certainly doesn't need to define your worth. Remember, don't compare your worth to their post. What would it look like if you began to guard your heart when it comes to comparing your life to others? I want you to imagine being able to walk in confidence about who you are. Imagine how different your day would be.